underground press after December of 1981. The blind cooperativist weekly, Ficus's, you know, the Most, I used to get all of these underground papers, and they were things that described how presidential systems worked in France and the United States. They were things that described how a market economy, it was an educational thing, but because it was forbidden, people read them. And it made a difference. And that is, to me, the untold, wonderful, wonderful story of Poland. Anyway, that's me.
But tonight, I'd like to raise my glass to the still, I think, unsung heroes. And that is the Poles who worked with us. Translators, researchers, the people who got those pictures, got soaked and perhaps worse doing it, the people who wrote, reported, people who were told by their government, you'd better inform and tell us everything these foreign journalists are doing. And then these Poles said, I don't know what the Polish for that is. I think the Polish word, correct me, because you know, our colleagues taught us a lot. And is there a word, spierdalać?
I'm John Darnton. Thank you, Ava. Thank you, David, for being here. I'd like to second what's been said, namely that whenever I hear people expressing gratitude to the Western press, I'm of two minds. It's music to my ears, clearly, but at the same time, you should know that we are not the ones who did it, that you are the ones who did it. We're just witnesses. You were the actors. You were the ones out on the field when we were on the sidelines. So all of it, all the accolades should go, I think, to other people in this room. There are some things I remember. One is driving from West Berlin during the height of the shortages back to Warsaw, crossing the border. I don't know if you know that border, but the Oder River, which sounds so important through history, is just this thin, brown, kind of ugly stream at that point. And there was an East German checkpoint, a blockhouse, very ugly, pockmarked. And we left late on a Friday evening. We were the last car in the line, and the East Germans were giving a very thorough search to every car ahead of us. And they took off the hubcaps, and they were taking off the panels of the cars, and the meat that people were bringing back was wrapped in plastic and kind of bleeding on the sidewalk. Something about that experience going through it was actually very frightening. When we got through, we were the last car. It was by now dusk, and my wife fell asleep, and we were driving into Poland. And just as an act of fantasy, I thought, this is this could be a scene, it would be perfect for a movie, for a robbery, if brigands would come out of the bush. And suddenly, going around a corner, 6 men materialized. I looked closely, they had army uniforms. They were Polish. They had bayonets on their rifles. And the leader stepped out in the road with his hand up, stopped our car. We were the only ones around. We lowered the window, came in, he asked for our papers. I handed him the papers. He looked up at me, he reached into his pocket, and he pulled out an old franc note, and he said, "Change money?" I'm back in Poland now.
I remember being in Poland in 1985. I was in and out of Poland. I had been stationed elsewhere. I was actually, when martial law happened, I was in Moscow, and then I was expelled from Moscow. And for a while, I could not get back into Poland. But in 1985, I was there, and at the time, Henryk Wujec, who is the underground leader of Solidarity, was the most wanted person in Poland, had not yet given many interviews, and someone from Solidarnosc came to me and said, would you like to interview Wujec? And I said, of course, I'd be delighted to, but I don't want to lead the secret police to his door. And they told me, well, you can come, this was May, it was a warm evening, come to Mokotów, that section of Warsaw, on such and such a street. If somebody meets you, that means you just follow his or her directions. So I show up, and sure enough, somebody comes, a short bearded man, and doesn't introduce himself. We just nod at each other. I follow him. We go into one apartment building, come out through the courtyard, there's a car pulling up, we get in, and so we have this kind of Hollywood style weaving around, being passed off. Only once did my escort show any nervousness. We came out of one of these courtyards, clearly waiting for a car, and nobody was there. And finally, one of these little Polish Fiats, the Malów, shows up, and she says, I'm sorry, it broke down, you know. We all knew those stories. But so, after weaving in and out of the city, all around the city, throwing me off, and I assume throwing off the secret police, we go to a set of, you know, very socialist apartment buildings. I'm brought up to an apartment on the top floor, and a couple of minutes later, a man comes in. I think I recognize. It's Wujec, but he has a goatee. He's put on pounds. You know, he's got almost an afro, and we sit down and talk for 3 hours.